Are heading out this morning, I want to take you back in time to the 1800s, where probably the most famous entertainer in the world in the mid-1800s was someone I'm pretty sure you've never heard of, a guy named Jean-Francois Gravelet. Have you ever heard of Jean-Francois Gravelet? I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. In the United States, he went by a different name, named Charles Blondin. And this is before TV, this is before movies, this is before radio, this is before Broadway and all these other things that make celebrities. Back in a day where you could be the most famous person in the world by being a tightrope walker. Yes, back in those days. You could be the most famous person in the world. And this guy was the best. He was the first person ever to come to the United States and to walk a tightrope across what? Who can guess? What'd you say? I can't hear you. Good guess, though. Still hadn't been done, but that would be good. What? No. 1855. Paul. Niagara Falls. Who's been to Niagara Falls before? Anybody been there? Is it big or small? Big. Big. Very big. Now, this guy didn't walk across Niagara Falls on a metal cable, but rather on a 2-inch hemp rope tied between objects and trees all the way across. And if you know anything about ropes, you know that where the heavy point of the rope is, when it's stretched that far away, those ropes stretch, that the rope becomes almost a V going down. Well, this guy came over and with great publicity staged this stunt to walk across Niagara Falls on a 2-inch rope with no net underneath him, nothing there to catch him. All it was with him and some thin leather shoes where he could feel the rope and a pole, about a 50-pound pole that he carried when he crossed it. And probably 40,000 people showed up, some on the Canadian side, some on the U.S. side, people taking trains and carts and horses, all to get there to see this thing that had never been done before. And he walked across perfectly fine. So the next year, when he wanted to do this again, he had to up his game a little bit. And so he went across blindfolded. All right? Anybody imagine doing that? The next year after he did it, he had to up his game again. Oh, we do have some pictures here. All right. Now they did. Look at that. That's a real picture. All right, let's go to the next one and just hold it right there. That is the Charles Blondin on his first time going across. He did it, after doing it blindfolded, he did it with a sack over the upper half of his body, like a burlap sack, if you can imagine that. Then he did it one time on stilts. Can you imagine that? He did it on stilts. There he's carrying a man who was his manager, Harry Colcord, on his back. One time he did it carrying a package of eggs and a little stove, and he walked out to the middle of the rope, sat down on the rope, made a fire in the stove, cooked the omelet, lowered it down to the Maid of the Mist boat. Some of you've probably been on. Anybody been on that boat before? And lowered it down, and they ate it on the deck of the boat. Right then and there. Another time, he carried a chair out there with him, which he set on one leg on the rope, and then you're thinking he sat on the chair? That's impossible. No, he stood up on the chair that was balanced on one leg on the rope. And one time, he pushed a wheelbarrow all the way across, and when he got to the other side, someone there was so amazed, just struck by the talent of this person. They had enough faith in Blondin that they said, you could probably do that, pushing somebody across in the wheelbarrow. And Blondin said, yes, I could. Will you get in the wheelbarrow? And what do you think they said? They said some things I can't even say in church, ending with no. Now, which of you who are above age 30 would have gotten in that wheelbarrow to go across? The part of your brain that fears death doesn't fully develop till you're 25, which explains a lot. So that's why I'm asking anybody over 30 who would be willing to get in that wheelbarrow, not this guy. But when I think about that person who said, wow, that's amazing. You can push somebody across there, who was so struck by the talent of this person, had such faith in them that they said that. But then when he said, okay, get in. No thanks. It makes me think about there's different levels of faith. I mean, the person who jumped out of the crowd and said that obviously believed in Blondin, and maybe they had been there and seen him in the blindfold. Maybe they had been there and seen him cook an egg. Maybe they had seen him on the chair and like, man, this guy can do anything. And he's like, yes, I can. Get in. No, thank you. It's a great metaphor for thinking about our faith. And that there are different kinds of faith, and there are different levels of faith. That it's not just faith or no faith. And certainly that faith is more than just acknowledging the existence of someone or something. The book of James and the Bible makes that clear in saying that even demons know God exists. I mean, of course they know he exists. So faith has to be more than just knowing he exists. The person there knew Blondin exists, that he was standing there in front of them. And faith has to be more than just thinking, hey, you're awesome. Blondin, you're awesome. You're amazing. Blondin says, get in. No, thank you. Faith has to be more than just you exist. You exist and you're awesome. Isn't faith more about getting in the wheelbarrow and saying, you're so awesome, yes, I will get in the wheelbarrow because I trust you. A great book written a few years ago by a guy named Craig Groeschel is called The Christian Atheist. It had a tremendous impact on me, such that for years I've been wanting to kind of share it with you and preach on it and kind of maybe inspire some of you to go read it. Written from a great perspective and acknowledging how common it is in our culture to see cultural Christianity, to see people who are Christianized but may not be Christian, who have kind of a worldly version of faith, if faith is just saying, yeah, God exists, but whose life reflects anything but trust in God, whose life reflects anything but getting in the wheelbarrow that is God. In the book, he lays out some different things that are signs of what it means to be a Christian atheist, what it looks like to be a Christian atheist. And one of those things that he talks about is how he's experienced in his own life and others the idea of people who believe in God but don't know him. Or you might say, who are informed about Jesus but have yet to be transformed by him. When I was growing up in Decatur, I went to Eastwood Elementary School, and I remember around third grade we had to do our first book report. And I don't know if I'd seen something on TV or whatever, but I was really interested in the Civil War. And particularly this kind of nefarious character, Ulysses S. Grant. Like the most unlikely person, the anti-hero, to turn the tide of the war. A guy who loved the bottle as much as he loved war. And he really did love war. Who some say that his greatest tactical ability was his willingness to lose soldiers. That if he had 50,000 and the enemy had 40, he would say, well, at the end of the day, we'll have 10 left and they'll have none and we'll have won. And his willingness to go through with that. A very rough character. And there's not a picture of him where he's shaved. Every picture of him looks like he just got out of bed after a long night of drinking. So something about his character I found curious. And so I found a book at the library and I read about it and I read most of it and did a book report on it and did fine. And it was kind of cool. The next year came around and eventually in the year we had to do another book report. Now the good students went to a new person to do a book report on. But I still remembered a lot about Ulysses S. Grant. And I thought, man, this will be easy. I know a lot about him already. And I'll go find another book and browse it maybe or skim it and do another book report on Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, I know what I need to know about him. You know, I got this. And I did it. Made a good grade. 5th grade rolls around and you have to dress up like a character in history. Well, who do you think I dressed up as? Ulysses S. Grant. I already knew all the things to say about him, and I read a little bit more, and I committed all this to memory where really I could just go through the motions because I kind of knew a lot. I was very informed about it. But could you say that I really knew personally Ulysses S. Grant? Or would you only say that I knew about him? Similarly, in our faith, we may be very informed about the church, informed about Christ, informed about Jesus, but not transformed at all. Christianized in some way, or considering ourselves Christian because, well, mom was a Christian, or my wife or my husband's a Christian, or we go to church when there's nothing else to do. I'm a cultural Christian. I'm a Christianized person, a churchified person, but lacking any personal knowledge of who God is. In Greshel's book, that's one of the ways that you might identify yourself as a Christian atheist. Someone who believes God exists, but has no personal relationship, knowledge with God that might lead to getting in the wheelbarrow because you've seen, experienced personally how faithful, how good, how true, how trustworthy God is. Another example that he mentions is believing in God, but not going overboard with this whole God thing. And he reflects on it this way: how you live reflects the reality of what you believe. And if your life of faith is more of trying to hold God at bay, you know, I want this much, but not too much. God, don't try to really get control of my life. If your life of faith is more holding God at bay instead of inviting God in, is more resisting God so that you can maintain sovereignty over the things that you don't want to be affected by God, then you have to ask yourself if you are a Christian atheist. Is God really Lord of your life? Are you a person who would ever get into God's wheelbarrow? Is he, in fact, the Lord? Or, in fact, maybe you are the Lord of your life. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 4, we see what it looks like to not be a Christian atheist. We see what it looks like to get in the wheelbarrow. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. As Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who's called Peter, Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Jesus said to them, "Follow me." That's it. Follow. He didn't say, memorize these 10 doctrines so that you can repeat them back to me verbatim. No. He said, follow me. This was the call. Follow me. Do something. Not think something, agree to something, acknowledge something, say some magical words, read a pamphlet. No, he says, follow me, and I will make you fish for people. Immediately, they left their nets, and they got in the wheelbarrow. Right? That's not exactly what it says, but that's what it means. Immediately, they left their families, they left their livelihood, they left their comfort zone, they left that bubble of, okay, I'll let you in this much, God, but don't try to get involved with this other part of my life here, God. Immediately, they left their nets, what they knew, what they were used to, their routine, their comfort zone. They left it and they followed him. As he went from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their father, and they got in the wheelbarrow with Jesus. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. When our life is marked with, I believe in God, but let's don't go overboard with this whole God thing, It might cost something. When our life of faith is determined by our preconceptions of what we will do and won't do, what's uncomfortable and what's comfortable, one thing I can tell you is God's not the one in control. You are. God's not the one who's setting the menu. You are. God's not the one calling the shots. You are. Because you've already determined what you will or won't do. God is not God. You are. But what underlies that is a sense that you don't trust him. He's going to take something away. He's going to hurt you. He's going to ruin you. As opposed to thinking, as opposed to believing that what he has for you is better than anything you could come up with on your own. As opposed to believing, God, you have a plan for my life and it's good. It's funny, it's called believing in God but not going overboard. You think about Peter. He went overboard, didn't he? And if he hadn't have gone overboard, he would have never walked on water. I guess the definition of following Jesus might invariably involve going overboard. And that until we go overboard, as Peter did, we never see what it's like to walk on water. Because we have held God at bay. Fear, ignorance, desire to be in control, whatever the case may be. When we live, I believe in God, but don't want to go overboard with God, we become what the writer of Revelation calls a lukewarm Christian, who often is a stumbling block to other people seeking God, which I'll explain in a moment. But in that text in Revelation, it's made clear that God would prefer us to be on or off. Don't be in the middle. Hot or cold, not lukewarm. And the lukewarm Christian craves acceptance from people more than acceptance from God. Whose acceptance, whose approval, whose affirmation do you seek in your life? The Christian atheist craves acceptance from people more than acceptance from God. Because of that, they rarely share their faith in Christ with other people because they're not passionate about Christ. They don't personally know Christ. They're informed, not transformed. Why would you share something with someone if it doesn't even matter to you? If you're not passionate about it, why share it with someone? If you don't believe that it's the most important thing, if you don't know that it's the thing that saved you or saved your marriage, why would you share it with someone else? The lukewarm Christian rationalizes sin because there's no grief, there's no contrition about it because it's not like you've wronged someone you know. God, you're God. You've wronged yourself. Forgive yourself. The Christian atheist only turns to God when they need something. God is not God. He's a 911 operator. In fact, the Christian atheist is not much different from the rest of the world. In fact, many non-Christians act more Christian than the Christian atheist. And maybe to me, the part that hurts the most, I think about our mission statement over the doors. You come in, strengthening families. How do we strengthen families? By making and growing highly committed disciples of Jesus Christ. The Christian atheist teaches their kids, not with what they say, but with what they do, teaches them that everything comes before God. And God is something we do if there's nothing else to do, if there's nowhere else fun to go, travel, beach house, sports, whatever hobby, interest, activity, everything comes before God, everything. And then wonders why their child doesn't grow up to really believe in God. The Christian atheist is surprised to have raised an atheist. They've outsourced sharing the faith to other people, but even those other people only got a crack at it once every 2 or 3 months. And let me ask you, is a soccer ball or a beach house going to be there for you when your spouse leaves you, when you get that diagnosis of cancer, when you lose your job, when you face death, when you have a big decision to make, when your child deals with these things, when you're gone, a spouse leaving, a diagnosis, a job loss, these things that you have put in their life instead of God, above God, pushing God to the side, are those things going to be something that's going to get them through, that's going to lead them away from temptation when they're tempted to betray maybe their marriage covenant? Is some ball or building going to bring them back to fidelity to their spouse? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell. The floods came. See, that's what life does. Life has a lot of rain. Life has a lot of wind. Life has a lot of storms. We all face it. The question is, where have you built your life on? What is it built on? The rain fell, the floods came, the wind blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. You know, you are laying the foundation for your children's home, if you have children. You are laying, vis-a-vis your children, you are laying the foundation for your grandchildren's home. Not with what you say, but with what you do. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. What are we building our house on? What are we putting our trust in? What are we putting at the center of our lives? What does our faith amount to? Hey, you're pretty good at that, blonde, and you're awesome, as we back away. God, you exist. Or my Lord and my God, I put my trust in you. Trust in God, a living faith, is a surrender. A surrender to someone who loves you more than you love you, who knows you more than you know you, and who has you more than you'll ever have you. And yet we try again and again to do it our way and are so surprised when it doesn't turn out. There's a Greek myth about a man named Sisyphus who was a king and who was egotistical and insisted on doing things his way, and he ultimately angered Zeus, like the head god in this myth, and he was punished for that. He was sent down to Hades, and he was given this huge rock. Some of you have heard of this before. There he is. And all he had to do was to push it up to the top of the mountain. But when he got up to the mountain, he was surprised to find that the rock kind of came to life and lurched to the side and rolled all the way back down. And Sisyphus, whose only task was to get it to the top of the mountain, had to go back down and get it and push it all the way up again. And when he got to the top, it lurched the other way and rolled all the way back down. Again, again, and again. The storms that we face in life are common to humanity. Predictable even, really. The storms that our children will face, our children's children, common to the human condition, predictable probably. What a sad state of affairs. To push that rock up again and again. All the while, if there was someone who would carry it for us, that we could surrender it to and say, God, take this from me. Who we could learn is trustworthy, who changes reality. What if instead we got in the wheelbarrow and said, God, I trust you. I trust you. A living faith, an acted on trust, is the hallmark of a true follower of Jesus. Something very different than a Christian atheist. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, will you pray with me?